Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Awesome Wholesaler Experience Podcast, where we look into the many facets of the job, the career, and the lifestyle of investment and insurance product wholesaling. I am your host, the creator of the Awesome Wholesaler Experience, and yours truly, Awesome Mike. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in. And before I introduce my special guest, I want to ask a favor. It's not too much trouble. Could you hit the subscribe button for me? Do me a solid. Appreciate your support for this show. For some reason, it's important that I get a lot of subscribers. I'm not sure why, but I would appreciate that if you're so kind to do it. If you like the show, share it with your friends, I guess, and we'll take it from there. But let me introduce yet another very special guest. I'm a big fan of this lady's, have been for years, as I'm sure that anyone that knows her is. But let me give her her due. On today's show, we have the guest, very special guest, Miss Cari Haught. Now, she is a certified executive coach. She's a business advisor, leadership strategist, and inspirational keynote speaker. She's also the co-founder and managing partner of Accendo Leadership Advisory Group. That, of course, means to ignite, by the way, if you don't speak Latin. And Cari and her partner there, Karen, are leaders that ignite leaders. Cari's also the president of C2, that's Charlie Deuce Advisors Incorporated. She's also been the former chief marketing officer for a little town called Orlando, a little company in that little town called CNL Financial Group. That's where I met her. And she also was a key advisor to the founders of Franklin Square Capital Partners during its very interesting startup phase. Now, prior to that, Cari was the executive vice president of the Orlando Magic. She was the president of RDV. That's Richard DeVos team Charities, I'm assuming. And she also played an instrumental role in the startup of RDV Sports and its holdings, which includes the Orlando Magic of the NBA, the Orlando Solar Bears of the IHL, and of course, the Orlando Miracle of the WNBA. Now, Cari earned her global MBA from Duke. Like, that's hard, Cari. And she also earned a BA from the University in Communications from the University of Central Florida's Nicholson School of Communication, where in 2014 she was inducted into the school's Alumni Hall of Fame. That is hard. But wait, there's more. Cari's also the wake up, Cari. She's also the executive director of the Center for Advanced Entrepreneurship at Rollins College Crummer Graduate School of Business, chairman of the board for the Center for Innovative Healthcare, secretary and board member of the National Justice Project, and a member of the Alumni Council, where I believe we were the chair of the Fuqua School of Business at Duke University. In her spare time, she produced and co-hosted a TV show, PM Magazine. She also led a year-long growth and exit strategy for one of the United States' largest privately held, family-owned beer distributors. Growth and exit. Cari, we call that the pump and dump, maybe the keg pump and dump, I guess.
There was a lot of keg.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Miss Cari Haught. Thanks for coming on, Cari. Appreciate you very much. How are you this morning?
I am outstanding. Awesome, I guess I should say.
You are indeed. You are indeed. Hey, I have a couple of questions, kind of personal questions before we get going. You know, you were instrumental at CNL during the I would call them the go-go years, although they've had a couple. Yeah, they've had a couple of real fortunate, wins. And you were there 2003 to 2007, 2004, 2007, just fantastic years for the company. And I was there for 10 years and included that time. But I wonder, Cari, did you ever find out what in the world CNL really stands for?
It stands for nothing. It doesn't stand for anything. Isn't that crazy?
Oh, I don't believe it. I don't believe it.
That's the story, and we're sticking to it. It stands for nothing.
So I did some more research on this, and I believe it stands for, it's an abbreviation, maybe a ticker symbol of the word centennial. I believe that when Bob and Jim started back in the day on the card table, when they had a little more hair than they do now, they called it the Centennial. Maybe it's a short. I don't know. I could be wrong. I also have heard that it stands for the company needs Larry.
That's a better one. I have also heard the Centennial story, but the version of that I heard was they were trying to think of what to name it. And for some reason, Centennial, was on a ticker tape or somewhere, and it was CNL. And they said, why not CNL? But the word Centennial really had no relevance. So anyway, it's a pretty boring story.
Yeah. Being a salesperson for them in the field, I always said stands for cannot lose. I mean, what a great investment you want. Or wait, we provided income real estate. It stands for the check is never late. And, unfortunately, there were some negative acronyms that we came up with as well. But
yeah, I'm sure.
Hey, serious note though, could you tell me about this thing? And I believe you have experience with it. At least you do much more than I do. But a lot of our listeners might not be familiar with it. But can you tell me what is this Landolozzi effect?
Oh my gosh, Landolozzi?
Landolozzi, I mispronounced it. Sorry.
You know where Landolozzi is?
I do. I do. I do.
Have you ever been to South Africa?
I have not. So please tell us about this Landolozzi effect.
That is an out from left field question. I'm telling you, I have twin daughters, as you know, and they graduated from college last year. And so we were brainstorming on what would be kind of a trip of a lifetime that we could take all of us on, because they were going to start their working lives. And we just didn't know as a family when we'd ever be able to take a big trip. So we went to South Africa, and it absolutely was a trip of a lifetime. And Landolozzi is the most special place just outside of Kruger National Park. And we were there for a week on safari. It's privately owned, really small, family owned. It's not one of the big sizzlers, but it was absolutely spectacular. And all of it, we would go back tomorrow if we could. So Landolozzi, if anybody's going to South Africa, check it out.
I thought you might like that. And I appreciate you lighting up like that.
I'm impressed with your research there, Mike. That's very impressive.
Just wait, there's more.
Oh, I'm afraid now. I'm afraid.
Oh, don't be afraid. So, the listeners on the show are primarily wholesalers, financial advisors, management. Most of them are executives, let's say. And we're talking about a few different things, but I want to kind of get a background on yourself. I know that you're a knight, or was it Black Knights, Golden Knights? What is it?
Golden Knights, I think.
Golden Knights sounds better, right? And then you went to Duke. Mm-hmm. So and you're still active there. You still are active in all of the locations. In fact, Crummer, right? Rollins, I should say, is right there in Orlando. And so and clearly your daughters, you have twin daughters, and they're both executives, let's say.
On their way, I hope. They're not quite there, but they're on their way.
Let me say that they're higher educated. That's what I mean to say.
Mm-hmm.
They're higher educated. I shouldn't say executive. Mm-hmm. Correcting me. So I want to ask you this question: what is your view on the value of higher education? It's a hot topic nowadays.
Oh yeah. And
the pendulum is swinging against it.
Right.
So tell us your thoughts on that.
Well, that's a good question. I'm a big believer in higher ed. I think if for no other reason, it breaks you out of, kind of where you are. It opens your mind. It challenges your brain, challenges your thinking. And in the world, maybe this will change in the future, but in the world as I know it, there's value in a college degree. And so, but for a young person, who's just, graduating from high school, to leave home and kind of find their way in a college environment and be challenged in that way. I mean, I know from my personal experience with my daughters, they grew immensely. Now, with that said, is every course you have to take relevant? Absolutely not. And I've worked in higher ed, and I can tell you absolutely that it's a bit in the dark ages when it comes to its thinking. One would think that it would be out in the innovation forefront, but they're really lagging, very much lagging in terms of their thinking and innovation. But I still am a huge believer in a college degree, for sure.
We appreciate that. And there were a couple of courses, that are maybe not being taught as much. Maybe they're evolving now, but like a public speaking course,
Yeah,
personal finance course,
right.
independent living type of courses. Is that what you're talking about when you say that the universities are still kind of archaic? Is that they're not leaning forward into what's going to help?
Now, what's so funny is there are many academics, not all, but many who, and I'm talking about PhD, tenure, academic types, who don't believe the purpose of a college experience is to lead to a job. you know, it's not a practical application of the learning. And so it's very much a snobbish approach, unfortunately, because they don't think the goal is, they think it's just, thinking and challenging your thinking, but their job is not to help the person get a job. And so the things you just described are very practical applications, right? How to speak better, how to write better. Those are all things that are going to help you get a job when you graduate. And unfortunately, depending on where you are, that's not always valued.
One of the things that you really impressed on me was your, I guess, I don't know what the word exactly is, but it's kind of ironic, but is the importance of writing skills.
Critical.
And then really the world of old school communications.
Yeah.
Let me ask you though, is that just because that was what we were raised on? Because the new generations, the idea of them, like a lot of them don't even know what this is.
No, I think that's tried and true. It has withstood the test of time and it will continue to be. And I would tell you, for people who can communicate, whether it's verbally, through the written word, it doesn't matter how smart you are, what your score was, on the IQ test. If you have the ability to communicate, you will go much further than someone who cannot. And it's a critical skill in my view.
Yeah, I agree with you. In fact, I wrote an article about the lost art of the handwritten letter, and it really is. And being a former soldier myself, there was nothing. In fact, I could still smell the letters that I got when I was at boot camp.
Of course, you probably still have them.
I don't. I don't. And that's maybe a topic for a different story. But essentially, they were not from my wife.
Oh, got it.
So I have the ones that are from my mother. But I have some handwritten letters here from the corporate life, and they become treasures. Really, they mean so much. Here's one from Dr. Rhodes.
Do you write notes? I write notes all the time.
Yeah, I don't write them all the time. I need to improve, but I do have my stationery handy. And one of the techniques that I shared on my article was when I go to a hotel as a wholesaler, especially if it's for a conference and it's at a nicer hotel, they have stationery.
Yeah.
Ask them for stationery envelopes, and I'll scratch out some letters, send them home, as well as have them for any kind of connections that I make at the conference.
Yeah.
It really does make it's worth its weight in gold. Everyone sends emails afterwards, and they all they don't mean anything. So that's another communication thing. Let's dig into this a little bit, though. We could talk for a long time. We don't have forever on the show. We could talk about your time at the Orlando Magic, which was terrific. I'm pretty sure that was one of the most memorable times in your life, one of the longest stints that you had. Mm-hmm. That was in your development phase. I should say that. I say that being cheeky a little bit, but let's talk more about your current views, Cari, your current role and what you're doing at Accendo. And I have some specific questions. But could you just give us kind of an overarching theme as to why you started this company and what you're doing with it?
Sure. Well, I obviously am a leader. I've held significant leadership. I've had the honor really to hold significant leadership positions in my career. And I learned a lot. I learned what not to do. I tried to hone and craft my leadership style and therefore my effectiveness as a leader. And so I like to think that I was, kind of a model of how and what to do. And I believe, given my track record and based on feedback that I've received over the course of my career, I was effective. And so, at this stage in my career, I really want to leverage everything that I learned to help others. And it's a passion of mine. I feel really strongly that leadership matters. It's the tone at the top. And if it's there, you know it. And if it is not, you also know it. So it's just a passion of mine, always has been. And so I'm fortunate now to be in a position where I can leverage all of my experience and my learning, because I continue to be a student of leadership, to learn every day. And the people I work with, I learn from them, and hopefully they learn from me. I learn from my students in the classroom. And so this is just really my opportunity to really give back, if you will, or pay it forward, and leverage my experience.
Well, we all thank you for that, and I thank you personally for it. I wish you great success with it. Let's kind of peel back a few layers of the onion on some of the work that you are doing currently, and I have a couple questions that you can help me clarify. Let's start with this one. What is the difference between leadership and coaching?
Well, leaders have to be good coaches. So, but coaching is about, if you have a direct report and you're their leader, but you want the person that you're leading, you want the light bulbs to go off in their head. If you're always telling them what to do, then the unintended consequences of that are they then become unnecessarily, inordinately dependent on you. But how do it's the old adage, teach them to fish, or teach them to fish rather than fish for them, right? And so coaching is asking the questions that are imploring, that pull the information out of the other person, and then puts the accountability back on them, on what are you going to do about it? How are you going to handle that? What are some ways that you might approach that? And it pushes people in a way to think in a way that they never thought possible about themselves, rather than becoming dependent on someone else to tell them what to do.
That's very interesting. I appreciate your perspective on that. My experience being in the military, I was both a soldier, a non-commissioned officer, and a commissioned officer.
Mm-hmm.
And in the military, they bifurcate the responsibility. The officers do not train or coach. They lead. And the non-commissioned officers end up doing a lot of the training, a lot of the coaching, a lot of the practicing.
Mm.
That leader, that lieutenant or commander that's out there, they're looking forward a lot. So it's interesting to hear, that your approach can kind of do a combination, and you're looking for maybe some of the best leadership traits to do that. One other thing too, everyone talks about you need a coach. Everyone needs a coach. They need a coach.
Mm-hmm.
And they always use LeBron has a coach, Serena
Mm-hmm.
has a coach, Tiger Woods. Maybe we won't use him anymore. But
Michael Jordan, who's right over there over my shoulder, he had a coach.
getting his shot blocked, it looks like. But
That's
anyways,
right.
Being from Detroit, I also can appreciate that blocked shot. Anyway.
I bet.
Yeah. But here's my question though. No one ever says, Mark Zuckerberg has a coach or Steve Jobs. It's always an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
And the only athlete that gets the nod for using a coach is this, I call it a technician.
Mm-hmm.
Tiger Woods has a swing coach. He clearly did not have a life coach.
Right. Yeah,
No disrespect, Tiger. Sorry, bro. You see where I'm going there. So is that just because of it's more recognizable and kind of lends credibility to coaching?
I think it's just an analogy that everyone can relate to, right? If you're going to be, they call them corporate athletes, right? If you're going to be a corporate athlete and you want to perform at the peak level that a world-class athlete would compete at, Why don't you think you need a coach when Michael Jordan needed a coach? Michael Jordan was one of the greatest NBA players of all time, but every day of his career, his professional career as an athlete, he had a coach. And the coach was a sounding board. The coach was someone to challenge him on days he needed to be pushed. The coach was someone to point things out to him. The coach was there to bring out the absolute best Michael Jordan that there could be. And you know, someone could argue, well, heck, he could have done that every day anyway. He had such talent. But the way you hone talent is practice and reflection and having people around you that push you. You know, you don't just come out of the womb, you know, making, you know, shooting like he did, right? It requires a lot of discipline and practice. And a coach is part of that equation. And I think it's the same in business. You know, I'm not a life coach, but it's the same in life, you know, and I think Tiger Woods needs a life coach, right? Or he perhaps would not have made some of the mistakes he made. And so in business, you know, that's the role of a coach, is to help you absolutely be the best you can be. But it requires you as the leader to want that, right? I always say to people, I'm not a fixer. If you want a fixer, you need to call someone else. But can I take you from where you are to an even higher level? I can, if you want that, because it does require some courage. It requires some discipline. It requires some humility. I always say to work with me, you need those three qualities: courage, humility, and discipline. You've got to want it. And if you do, let's go. Michael Jordan wanted it.
Clearly, you know, you mentioned the value of having a sponsor,
Mm-hmm.
as a youngster.
Ah.
Is that the same as a mentor?
You know, mentors and sponsors can be one and the same. I always say mentors help you skill up, sponsors help you move up. So a sponsor is someone who's made it, but who has stakes their reputation on pulling you up with them. A sponsor is someone who's sitting at the table with their peers when you're not in the room and says, no, I'm telling you guys, Mike Baker is the guy that needs to do this. I would stake my reputation on that. That's a sponsor.
Not too many of those guys around. Anyway, so how would a wholesaler or a financial advisor kind of use that, you know, that kind of a structure, or use that kind of a strategy? Or is it something that's really just for the youth?
No, I don't think it's for the youth at all. You can always have sponsors. You know, where do you want to go? When I think of in my career back in, you know, in my heyday, I didn't even know I didn't know what a sponsor was, right? Now I know. I wish I'd known all that. But when I reflect back, I realize I had sponsors. That's, you know, who, you know, you have to, sponsors find you. You can find a mentor, but sponsors find you. And how do they find you? Well, you have to perform. You have to be memorable. You have to be someone that they want to pluck out of the crowd and move up, right? But sponsors find you. And so I think that's the message for anyone, wholesalers, financial advisors, anyone, is, are you performing? Are you memorable? You know, if someone were watching you from a distance, or someone were interacting with you, would they go, wow, now that's someone that I can bet on? Are you someone that someone else can bet on?
That's very inspiring. That's a good, clear distinction. I appreciate that. You know, at Accendo, um, you're using, and I'm assuming Karen's on your team as well, of course, but you're using this method that you learned at school. Basically, you're using the Marshall Goldsmith,
Mm-hmm.
Harvard, and no disrespect to that school.
Mm-hmm.
Or Dukies around here, anyways, or War
Okay.
Eagles, or War Eagles.
Or Eagle.
Shout out, tip of the hat to Maddie.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what's the difference between being a disruptor
Mm-hmm.
and being a disruptive leader?
Hmm. Well, I think probably there's not a lot of difference, although I think when you are a leader, you have to recognize that you have a there's responsibility that goes along with being a leader. And is there I would have to ask myself, is there responsibility if you're just simply being a disruptor? Probably not. I mean, if you picture in your mind, who would you picture as a disruptor, right? And you think, they probably didn't care. They probably felt no responsibility. But I think if you're a disruptive leader, you have a responsibility. There's a greater accountability and responsibility, because you can't, if we could do things alone, we could lead ourselves. But to truly be a leader, you have to work with and through others. And so there's a responsibility that goes along with that. So I guess that would be my response to that.
You look at a lot of the great leaders of our generation, this generation, and they're usually measured by monetary success. At least they are in the public eye.
Right.
And as you know, that can be a false front.
Yeah.
They could have just the tip of the iceberg might be their corporate success, but underneath of it, Bezos,
Yeah.
I don't want to say it. There probably are nights where he would give all the money back just to have his bride back.
Yeah, right.
So with your coaching, the way you do it, you have this formula called GROW.
Hmm?
And so can you tell us about that a little bit?
Sure. That's a coaching approach.
Right.
So GROW is an acronym. The G stands for goal. The R stands for reality. The O stands for options, and the W stands for wrap up, but really it's about, okay, what are we going to do next? And so if I'm having a conversation with you, or you're having a coaching conversation with someone else, you and I are meeting, and I would say to you, the G is, well, hey Mike, how you doing? So what's up? How's it going? Oh, well, Carrie, and you might say, well, Cari, I'm kind of, I'd really love to pick your brain. I really feel like I'm ready to move to the next level, or I'm not, maybe you're a financial advisor. Maybe I just don't feel like I'm accomplishing, the goals that I've set forth, and I don't know what I'm doing wrong. So that's the G. We've established the goal of the conversation. And then the R is the reality. So I would say, well, tell me a little bit about that, Mike. What's the backstory? Where, what are you doing? What's the current state? So I want to understand. We want to have a conversation about, well, where are you today? And what got you here? Right. And this is all about the questions I asked you, because I'm not telling you what to do. I'm asking you. And then the O is, okay, well, that sounds interesting. Well, given the fact that, it took you 5 years to get to this level, you had rapid growth, in that 5-year period, but now you feel kind of stalled, and you recognize that these outside forces are at work. What do you think some options are? I mean, let's just dream here a minute. What are some possibilities here? What are some possible things that, you could do? So then we just have a brainstorming, and we're trying to get to the O, which are the options, right? And I might have in my head some options, but I want you to come up with them. And so I'm pushing you. Yeah, but what about that? Well, tell me more about that. So I'm really pushing you to think. And then if, over the course of that conversation, you haven't come up with some of the ideas in my head, I go, well, have you ever thought about this? Have you ever thought about that? So we're just having a really robust kind of problem-solving, dreaming conversation. And then once we're done with that part, I say, wow, this has been great, Mike. So what do you think? What would, we've really come up with some incredible ideas. What do you think? What are you going to commit to? What are your next steps to begin to explore? And then that's pushing it back on you for you to go, well, I think I might do X, or I might do X, Y, and Z. And then I say, that's a great start. When do you think you can have that done by? So I'm now getting you to commit. Oh, I think I could do that in a couple of months. Great. Why don't we get our calendars out right now? And why don't we get back together in a couple of months? Because I want to hear how you're doing. Does that sound good? And so we've just had a coaching conversation. I've really done nothing. It's really all on you, right? I've just gotten you thinking bigger, and then you leave with a skip in your step. I do this exercise with people all the time, and I say, so how did it feel to be the person on the receiving end of the leader of that coaching conversation? And 100% of the time they say, I felt it so empowered. I was so excited. So that's the GROW model, and it is a powerful coaching model and empowering approach, I think, for leaders with others.
Very interesting. You know, it makes me think of several different things, and we'll go down a couple of these trails. A big one, though, is that by you doing that, Cari, it's almost like you're giving them permission to be excellent.
Absolutely. You know, and if someone has learned to be dependent and you're having that conversation with them, they struggle, right? They want you to tell them. And I'll say, no, I'm not, this is not about me telling you. And then you say, well, what are some ideas? Well, I don't know. Well, no, I think you do. I really do. So let's dig a little deeper there, right? And so it's all in the ability to ask the right questions, right? To help tap into, Mike, I think you really do. Now, you told me once that story where you did X. Tell me more about that. Where did that come from? How did you come up with that? And then as they start, the wheels start turning, you can pull it out of them. But it's a real skill. It's very conversational. It doesn't feel stilted, or like I'm following a formula. Hold on, I got to look at the instructions here to have this conversation with you. It's very natural, and you get better and better at it the more you do it.
I think you've really developed your style over the years. In fact, I found a post or a comment that you made to a young lady at one time. She said to you, Mom, I'm bored. And you said, oh, sorry, kiddo, suck it up.
Yeah, I've said that a few times.
You said it publicly, and kudos to you, because I think this Kate is well on her way to be the fashion icon, and we definitely need some more people like her in that industry for sure. So best of luck. Tip of the hat to Kate and her successes. New York City, right?
They're both in New York.
Yeah. Now, do they share an apartment there?
They do. They're living together.
How cool is that? How cool is that?
Living the dream. And they had this plan. They're very, very, very different girls. They had very different college experiences. But their plan was always to come back together after college and live together in New York City. And that's what they're doing. So I'm really proud of them.
So those of you out on the Lower East Side, be careful when you go to Russ and Daughters.
Oh,
you might have some virtual owners there. Terrific story. Wish the best to both of them. And I'm sure they're going to have the best, frankly. Your style is a very interesting one, Cari. Not only do you use the GROW model, but you use a little technique that I think everyone that's listening could also employ. And that is this idea of developing feedback loops through these, I guess they're called 360 interviews with stakeholders.
Yeah.
Can you explain that strategy?
I would love to explain that to you, because I think it's critical. First of all, feedback, I would tell you, feedback is the currency for successful leadership. And unfortunately, what happens is the higher up the food chain we move, we tend to ask for feedback less and less. And we tend to find ourselves surrounded by people who withhold honest feedback, right? Because there's a power dynamic. Maybe we contribute to that. So that would be my first point and lesson, is never get to a place where you don't ask for feedback, and more importantly, where you don't listen to feedback. And, or then you become the emperor who wears no clothes, right? And so that is a trap of success that leaders should always be mindful of. So with that said, a lot of times when you say to someone, Mike, you're a great guy, but can I give you some feedback? Yeah, exactly. The hair on the back of your neck. Yeah. And you're like, I know I need to hear this. I'm ready. Give it to me, and you brace yourself, right? So instead of calling it feedback, we call it feed forward. Feed forward. Because Mike, this is not about your past. This is about making you the absolute best you can be moving forward. And so you want to establish these feed forward loops with people. You want to find stakeholders, people who are invested in your success, who are in a position to observe your behavior on a regular basis, and who you trust and for whom they trust you. And then you want to say, I'd love to establish a feed forward loop with you. I'm, based on the feedback I've received, or a 360 meaning, people that surround you at different levels have provided input and feedback into your strengths and weaknesses. Based on all that I've heard, I know that I need to work on communicating better. I'm closed. I'm not transparent. I'm perceived to be elitist, and I really got to work on that. So Mike, could I, I'm sharing that with you. Could you give me any suggestions on my behavior and what I could do on a day-to-day basis? And you give me some suggestions, and I listen. It's good feedback, and I say thank you. And then I say, Mike, I'm committed to working on this. Can I check in with you periodically? And you let me know how I'm doing. And then it doesn't have to be a formal meeting. We pass each other in the hall, or we're at the water fountain, or whatever. And I say, Mike, how you doing? I'm really working on being more transparent in communication. Have you noticed anything, in what I've been doing? And then the person will go, Cari, when you did so-and-so, that was awesome. But I got to tell you, in that meeting yesterday, when Joe said so-and-so, you really closed up. And you patronized him. You thumped him. And then that gives me the opportunity to go, wow, you know what? You're right. I didn't even think about that. So you learn, through these feed forward loops, if you listen and if you ask. And that's how you get better. That's how you grow. That's how you improve.
Is there the right number or a range of feedback loops that is the right amount to have?
No, I think it depends on the context of your situation. You don't want to have too many, because that could get overwhelming. But I would say 10 or under 10, it might just be 5. But the more critical, I think the more critical point is, it needs to be people who are invested in your success, who you trust and they trust you, because you want honest feedback, right? And that are in a position to observe your behavior on a regular basis. That's the more critical question.
Well, as you're talking about this, frankly, it sounds nice. It sounds, kind of pleasant, maybe cotton candy. And I think about, okay, Steve Jobs, could you imagine his feedback loops? Nope. In fact, a lot of these top guys, Jordan even, might not have cared about feedback loops. So is there what do you say to that? The guy.
That's a good question. And I'm guessing Steve Jobs did not establish feedback loops. He probably never asked anybody for feedback. But I would tell you, Steve Jobs was a disruptor. I don't know that he was a disruptive leader. Now, was he successful? Yes, he was. And did he build one of the greatest companies of all time? Yes, he did. But think about what it would have been like to be on his team. And a certain kind of person is going to thrive, or really probably survive, in that kind of environment. So I admire Steve Jobs tremendously, but I personally don't believe he was a disruptive leader. I think he was just simply disruptive and very, very successful. So you don't have to be a leader to be successful. There's plenty of examples of people who have built successful companies and they've been absolute jerks. I just happen to subscribe to the philosophy that you are gonna be better, you're gonna be even more successful if you pay attention to the attributes of leadership. And at the end of the day, you might have a big bucket of money, but if nobody's going to come to your funeral, I think that matters.
I also agree. And I've had the pleasure of working at CNL for a long time and being able to be under the leadership of Larry Goff and guys that really, I believe, embody and live that whole person concept. I've also worked at American Realty Capital for Nick Schorsch and those guys, which would be on the other end of the pendulum. I mean, it's America. You can do what you like to do.
Right, sure.
And I do know that even myself personally, I enjoy my life a lot more when I am not gnashing my teeth trying to get just one more dollar, because when you make it about money, there's never enough.
Right. That's absolutely right.
You do talk about unfiltered conflict, though, Cari. You say that actually unfiltered conflict can lead to genuine buy-in on a team. Can you tell us about that? Maybe how we can facilitate that?
I think conflict can be good as long as it's healthy conflict. I think outcomes are innovative and so much better. The quality of outcomes is so much better if you allow healthy conflict to exist. But there are some things that are foundational that require healthy conflict to thrive. And one is trust. And trust builds respect. And, if you and I were on a team of people, of peers who respected one another, respected what each of us brought to the equation, and knew that as a team we were better off because we each contributed, and we trusted that, and we built that trust in one another, but you and I have a different perspective on something, to challenge each other in a healthy way is going to produce a better outcome, because probably my idea unilaterally is not the best way to go, and your idea unilaterally. And it's well proven that, I was just listening to a book yesterday called The Wisdom of the Crowd. And research tells us that outcomes are better when we allow the strength of groups and diversity of thought and approach to prevail. But we can't take, but trust and respect have got to be foundational to that process. So if you don't have that, conflict's gonna persist. It's gonna erode. It's gonna be like a cancer. It closes people off. We close our ears. So conflict can be really, really bad, but it can be very, very healthy given the right conditions.
I was just saying that I'm thinking of some of the greatest leaders and coaches of our era, guys that are on the media's forefront, guys like Coach K, Coach.
Oh yeah, Mike Krzyzewski at Duke.
Guys like Nick Saban.
Mm-hmm.
Guys like Bill Belichick.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone's providing them with any kind of healthy conflict, maybe behind closed doors, but there's no doubt who's in charge. There's no doubt who's writing the script and who's calling the plays.
Yeah.
So is that a different level? And are we talking like, does your comments about having that unfiltered conflict really reflect more behind closed doors, or is it more for a lower level, do you think?
No, I think I bet you all three of those coaches have healthy conflict on their teams. Now, there's no question they're the leader, but they bring out the absolute best in their players, in their team. And so those teammates have to respect and trust one another. They have to trust that the lineman is going to do what he is there to do, and that the quarterback is going to do what he is there to do, right? So that's the essence of a team. That is the essence of the team. So I think it prevails no matter where you are. And I promise you, those teams the true essence of those teams has got to be that they trust and respect one another. And they've built, those coaches are some of the greatest coaches of all time. And I promise you they've done that, because the old school way of coaching, the dictatorial, beat them up, Bobby Knight kind of approach, that only lasts so long. And then at some point that team just gets spent. Their cup is full and runneth over, and they just can't perform under those circumstances anymore. But if you want to sustain success, then you do it the way Coach K does it, Belichick, et cetera. And that's how you sustain success year in and year out, team in and team out, person in and person out.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I've been a Duke fan for years, and because I'm a pride guy. I like winners. I like to win. But recently, though, I have to ask you, who do you think is a better coach, Cari? Do you think that Coach K is a better coach, or do you think that Tom Izzo against State Spartans is a better coach? And let me kind of clarify why I'm asking the question. Every year, Coach K has anyone he wants to pick to come. He gets the top 3 picks sometimes. Calipari gets the other 2. Roy gets Tom Izzo gets some guys from literally the hood,
right?
Tattoos already, and we're talking like the Flintstones, right? he actually beat Coach K last year in the tournament. So who actually is a better coach and leader?
Well, I would tell you they're both great coaches in their own right, and there's a tremendous talent in being able to bring out the best in someone who doesn't, maybe isn't right at the top or have the foundation, that you're looking for. No question about that. But there's also talent and an approach when you've got just a bunch of superstars, and if they're all, that is a challenge in and of itself, to get a superstar and a bunch of superstars to trust and respect each other and the talent each of them bring, and to serve as a team. We were talking about Michael Jordan. There was a time in his career before they won so many, championships, and he would get 65 points every game, and it was all about him. And the story is famous, right? Where he and Phil Jackson, his coach, where Jackson got in his head and said, listen, if you want this team to perform, and if we're going to sustain excellence over the course of time, you've got to back off and be a team player. You've got to pass the ball. You've got to make others around you excellent, right? So there's a talent to there, Coach K's also got to coach, just in a different kind of way. So I think they're both outstanding coaches.
I agree. And you kind of went right. You went where I was going to go in that Phil Jackson might be a better coach than all these guys, because Izzo, Coach K, they know that they're focusing on 1 to maybe 2 years.
Right.
That's all they get. Phil Jackson took the reins over from Doug Collins and took Chicago to 6 championships. Now, he couldn't win without Jordan.
Right.
Then he went to the Orlando Lakers. Pardon the pun there. He got Shaq started there, and got tired of losing in Orlando, and then left and went to.
No, he won in Orlando.
There you go. And but Phil Jackson was able to do it with more superstars like Shaq and Kobe, and they're supporting Fisher and those supporting cast. So it's interesting to see that coaching thing. Now wholesalers also have coaches in their leadership, and it's interesting to see how personalities can shape the sales team.
Oh, no question.
So would you recommend that a national sales manager be more of a leader or more of a coach to their wholesalers in the field?
I think you got to be both. You've got to be both. You've got, in leading, you're motivating others. You're casting a vision, for where you're trying to go. You're saying, follow me. So they, a national sales manager has to do that. But absolutely has to be able to coach, because coaching is all about bringing out the best in others. It's about sitting back and observing the personalities and trying to understand how each of them fit together. What's the best, chemistry of the team, who needs to be in what seat, et cetera. And there's a huge talent to that. And so I just don't see them as mutually exclusive. I think the best leaders are also great coaches.
That's an awesome phrase and ideology, actually. Now, you mentioned that leadership needs to set leadership behavior goals.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us what you're talking about there? And even and isn't sales just a numbers game? I mean, what do we need leadership goals for?
Well, sales is a numbers game, but I think that's the trap of sales, and that's fine. Sales is transactional, and and if that's what we want to be, and it's just all about the transaction and what you did for me today and what your numbers are, that's good. That can work, certainly. But if you want to kind of get everyone to peak performance, then I would tell you it's the things that aren't the numbers, especially the higher up on the food chain or the more successful you are, that matter. There's this thing called emotional intelligence. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's well proven that I'm not saying that you're not emotionally intelligent. I can tell just by looking at you. But it's emotional intelligence in the context of leadership. Emotional intelligence is the single best predictor of success at the highest level of leadership. And that's because everybody gets to a certain place in their leadership ascent, and then everybody's the same. It's just the skill, what got you there are the table stakes. But what's going to get you to the next level is your ability to motivate others, your ability to connect with others, your ability to read the room, right? In sales, you've got to be able to read the other party and know and change course in the course of the conversation or the exchange. That is a form of emotional intelligence. You and I were talking about when I came into CNL, and CNL was a very, 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 should I say, very conservative environment, right? And I had just come from sports, and we were talking about a sales meeting where I wanted to replicate one of the things that we did at Magic Games, which was the slingshot T-shirts out. And I remember saying to Tim and Larry, I think this would be fun. It's a group of salespeople. You're trying to motivate them, rah, rah. And they were like looking at me like, you're going to slingshot T-shirts. And I was like, listen, you guys are just too stuffy. And people need to enjoy what they're doing. And so that's a form of emotional intelligence, I would tell you, because I was reading the room. And that's what the room wanted, right? And so emotional intelligence is your awareness of yourself. It's your ability to build relationships. It's your ability to pick up on social cues. And some people would say, well, that's the soft stuff. Well, yes, it is. But it's the soft stuff that gets you from being a great salesperson who meets your numbers to more than that. And so if you want to be more than a great salesperson who meets your numbers, then you gotta pay attention to some of the soft stuff.
Would you say that the soft stuff doesn't matter if you can't do the hard stuff in the sales numbers? But
yeah, of course.
If you
because the hard stuff gets you to here, right? That's the table stakes. Well, but then you look around, everybody next to you is at the same place, right? And so what's going to then differentiate you from the rest? It's going to be some of the soft stuff.
Yeah, that's genius. In fact, you bring up a couple of things. I do remember clearly the T-shirt slingshot. Now, let me set the stage for the audience. We're in one of these ballrooms at I don't know which fancy hotel it was down in Orlando. So there's china and silverware and crystal glasses, and all of a sudden, Cari asked for a couple of volunteers. She brings out these big slingshot bands, and yours truly runs up there with my my brother Steve Fogarty. Shout out to Steve. Hope he's doing well. And we proceed to launch these T-shirts across the room. And
The music, by no less. We had music blaring.
it was a commercial quality. The only thing we could do is fireworks, but it was indoors. But Cari, I have to say that I recall that vividly. And you're right. It was a little bit of a shock treatment, but I think that the shock was once they opened the T-shirt up. And on the T-shirt was our arch rival, their logo, but upside down. You recall that? We were going to take it to them that year.
Right.
We were going to get after it and go. And so one thing was that was a little bit aggressive in some people's mindset. But you mentioned something earlier about trust. And I believe that when that was going on and at that company, there was an element of untrust or distrust.
Yes.
And that was the key. The room did not trust leadership to be able to, everybody was afraid to irritate or agitate or not follow in line to the robotic leadership at the time.
Right.
And I think that's a great example of why that trust is so important.
Critical.
To build a team.
It's absolutely critical. If you have that, and you can't take it for granted, you've got to invest in it continually. But if you have that, it is golden. It is golden.
It really provides for so much fulfillment as well. You know, there was a time where I had stuck my foot in my mouth at CNL and talked to Larry Gong. Yeah, join the club. But Larry pulled me aside and he said, "Hey man, you can't be afraid to speak up and to make those mistakes. You know, we need you to be able to, tell us what you really think and and without worrying about, I guess the result." But frankly, I was worried about it. You know, they had just bought me this nice watch. And I didn't want to find myself on the street or even not in good graces.
Right.
But that trust, I think, is really, it's key. Stephen Covey, rest in peace. You know, he wrote the 7 Habits, but his 8th habit was the speed of trust.
Right.
A terrific book as well.
It's a great book. And in that book, they talk about the 13 behaviors of high trust leaders. And I use that all the time. It's here, over here are the behaviors of high trust leaders. And over here is the opposite. Do you know a leader who undermines? Do you know a leader who never has your back? Do you know a leader who blows smoke? Right. And it's really a powerful look at what I believe to be the best form of leadership.
I experienced this leadership technique. I was given a task by my direct supervisor, and the task was to take a look at the spreadsheet or whatever it might be, or what have you. And it was begrudging. It was like, I'm like, I'm a wholesaler. I'm a cowboy. Let me get out there and sell something. Right. But being a good soldier, try to open the spreadsheet, and it's password protected. So I go back to my leader and I said, "Hey, this thing's like locked up, password protected, whatever. Is there a password?" And he says to me, "Oh, you have passed the test." Yeah. Like it was a trick to see who was actually going to do it. This is no kidding. And I was so turned off by that I could never trust that person. And it really hurt my ability to trust all management now, because once you're burned by that stove, it's hard to go back to it.
It's hard to regain that. That was very manipulative.
It was childish and interesting. And I'm not sure that it worked, but at least I give the guy credit for trying something. You tried something at CNL. You brought in a bunch of smart people from McKinsey.
Mm-hmm.
And they did a big study. And I wanted to just, not dig into it at all, but basically to ask you if you recommend companies to do that, or is that an archaic method for more accounting firms than it is for a sales firm?
No. I mean, McKinsey had a lot of smart people, and we were our charge in bringing McKinsey in was to try to figure out how CNL could grow. And where their age, so it's really about a growth strategy. And so they really challenged our thinking and challenged the thinking of, the executive team and the owners. And, it doesn't have to be McKinsey that you bring in, but I think anytime you bring someone in that challenges your thinking, I think it's really critical. I remember vividly, part of the McKinsey study was to try to figure out what was CNL's core business, right? And Jim and Bob were big on, we're in the real estate business. And so McKinsey's going to it, and they come back, and I was always the filter. So they'd meet with me first, then we'd go meet with Jim and Bob, right? And I'd be like, well, maybe this is how you should say it, or this is how you should position it. And they were like, you're not in the real estate business. And I was like, well, what are we in? Because we weren't. Would you agree with that? Yeah, we were in the business of selling alternative securities really, really well, right? And that's the business we were in. And it happened to be real estate securities, right? But we were not in the real estate business. And I just remember that vividly. But my point in bringing that up is that was like, whoa, we're not in the real estate business. And I said, we've got, we're going to share this with upper management, with ownership, because you're right. And so anytime you bring in someone from the outside, they come in with a fresh perspective. They look at it differently, and that will challenge your thinking. And you should always be open to that. And at the end of the day, at the end of that study, we realized we were not in the real estate business. What we were really, really good at during that time was selling alternative securities in the retail market, right? And so that's what we are, right? And that's where you begin, is really understanding the business, kind of what business are you in, what is your core business, and what are you really good at. So I'm a huge fan of always bringing anything in from the outside or inside. That goes back to what we were talking about earlier: feedback, having big ears, listening, conflict. That fraught with potential conflict. Absolutely, but you gotta be open to that. So I think that's all. I get really, really excited about that kind of stuff.
Clearly, and you're excellent at it. It's interesting. CNL is a pioneer and a legend. Even in their current state of transformation, there are still some of the deep roots that make up their culture, and I wish them nothing but the best, and I give them nothing but the most admiration.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to point out both their successes and mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take this journey around third base now, and it's one of the teams that you didn't sponsor, actually. Interesting. So that's called baseball. Therefore, anyways,
I'm not a big baseball fan.
I just want to ask you a couple maybe interesting questions. You've got this great family, Cari, and I'm sure that everyone that's been around you corporately is a part of your family, academically is a part of your family, and then your real family is just picturesque and almost picture perfect, frankly. A lot of people would say that. And as I'm doing my research, I kind of looked at it, and I'm like, but then I realized, I said, you know what, this is like Facebook, this is like LinkedIn, this is not, you always put your best foot forward out there.
Of course.
Yeah. And so I wanted to ask you about your Christmas card post. Every Christmas, you put this picture of the same 5 stockings on the same fireplace. What is going on with your Christmas post?
Yeah, it's so funny. You start with the Londa Lazzi effect, you're going to finish with Christmas. I think that's a great shot, and it's just so wholesome and wonderful. And, it's funny you should ask about that, because every year I've always done like a customized Christmas card of something, right? And it's never the 4 of us smiling by a fire. It's always got some creative bent or motivation, or, I don't know, something behind that. And there's always a lot of pressure every Christmas to what are you going to come up with. But, my goal in that is just to kind of fuel, I guess, the values that I have and the things that I hold very dear. And yes, I've been a successful leader, but I think more importantly, I want to be a successful person. And I'm a whole person. And part of that is being a mother and a wife. And, my family's very important to me. And I think that's one of the things I always say to leaders. I work with leaders sometimes on creating their own personal vision, creating a personal vision for themselves. And sometimes the question will be, well, do I have one of these for work and one of these for home? And my answer is always, no. Are you two different people, or are you a whole person? Are you one person? And I've always viewed myself as that. It's all of that is very, very important to me. And I'm a whole person, and my family is a very, very important part of that.
Yeah, clear. Now you mentioned 4 of you, but they're actually, and I hesitate to ask this. Hopefully, it's a good answer you're going to give me. But there's really 5 of you.
There are.
Yeah,
and still around.
That little golden doodle Harley is just tremendous. What a great dog. I have Wheaten Terriers, but golden doodles are a little smarter, frankly. But they are just precious, and he has been an icon, a staple in your family for a decade now.
Yeah, you have done your homework. I'm so impressed. I'm a little afraid of what's out there on me.
Well, let's just say that I did the homework after I invited you to come on the show. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. All right, so let's do this. Let's kind of wrap up. I want to ask you my 2 signature questions, Cari. I ask these questions to all guests. So
Okay.
no wrong answer, but there are some better answers than others. I stoke that competitive edge inside of you there a little bit. All right, first question. You pick up the telephone, ring, ring, ring. On the other end of the line is 23-year-old Cari Haught.
Oh.
You've got a couple minutes to talk to her. What advice would you give to your younger self?
I would say always believe in yourself. Always believe in yourself. I don't know that I always did that as a young person. And I made my way kind of through trial and error. I didn't have a lot of mentors. I didn't have a lot of role models. And I would just say, always believe in yourself.
Love it. Simple. Now, let me ask you this quick question. Did you tailor that based on the fact that both of your daughters are 23 today?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. When I found out I was pregnant with twins, I really prayed it would be 2 girls, because I felt like I've learned so much of what it is to be a strong, female that is secure in themselves. And I did it kind of the hard way. And I felt like if I could be the mother of daughters, that I could save them from, some of the pitfalls. And that I really just wanted to raise 2 women who were secure and confident in themselves. And, God gave me 2 little girls. And that's been very much a joy and a gift and a privilege to raise daughters. And I'm excited to see where they go in their life. As well.
Yeah, in fact, I know that you once said that in your next life you'd like to come back as your daughters.
I would absolutely like to come back.
They have just incredible momentum in their life, and I'm sure a lot of the credit goes to themselves, but also to you and to Russ for your work.
But they're great. They're great people too, and they've earned it.
Clearly,
they've not been given it, and I'm proud of that.
Yeah, it shows as well, and appreciate and respect both of them. Really quickly, if I could give you any superpower, Cari, a legit one, which one would you choose, and maybe what would you do with it?
Oh my gosh, a superpower. What would be a superpower? I guess it would be maybe to read people's minds. I don't know why I say that. That's just what popped into my head. I love trying to figure people out. And I pride myself in not talking, but observing. So I'm an observer of people. And I pride myself in the ability to connect with others, no matter where they come from and how vastly different it would be from me. So maybe I think I'd like to read people's minds because it might be validating, it would be illuminating, and it would help me in this quest to connect with others in a meaningful way. So I'm reading your mind right now, Mike.
Be careful what you ask.
Yeah. Now you're thinking this woman's a whack job, man.
Not at all. In fact, I'd like to thank you for being on the show today, Cari, and really thank you for the many years of all of your hard work and helping people to really, to be all that they can be. So on behalf of myself and of everyone that you've touched on your life, I'd like to say thank you on their behalf as well. We all appreciate you and your work and wish you much fortune and success both now and in the future. Now, Cari, as we say on the Awesome Wholesaler Experience, it's about the journey, and we wish you well on yours. I look forward to seeing you again soon. And a huge thank you to everyone for tuning in today. And again, if you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button. Do me that solid. And you can even join the notification squad so that you never miss an episode like today's. If you like this episode, go ahead and share it with your friends and colleagues. And we appreciate you doing that. So again, as usual, thank you for supporting the show. And of course, thanks for being awesome. Goodbye, everybody.